Welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's show, we're telling stories with JoAnn Lower, who grew up on a farm near Thompson, Iowa. We explore the buzz about an agricultural economic bubble with an ag economist. Kent Theisse remembers the days of the open cry pit at the Chicago Board of Trade, and Sue Gorman visits with Maggie Mills about career goals. Stay with us. Farm Connections is next.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Brought to you in part by Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility producing 115 million gallons of ethanol every year, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood.
Joining us on Farm Connections today is Ed Ussett, an Ag University of Minnesota economist. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dan.
Well, we've got a lot of things happening in agriculture as always. What's happening in the ag economy part?
Well, we've had lower prices and they continue, but you and I have shared an article on Forbes here where the guy's trying to paint this as a bubble, and my question for this particular writer is, where were you a year ago? This is not new news. Just for perspective, I mean, corn today is probably $3.30 a bushel here in southeastern Minnesota. It was 50 cents a bushel less a year ago. So we've dealt with this a while. Corn, to be fair, wheat and soybean prices are even lower today. But this is not this idea that the economy is falling apart is not something new. We're now going on a year and a half with lower prices.
Can you define what is a bubble?
Well, they're a popular thing because I don't know if I can define it, but all the listeners know it when they see it. Be it the dot-com bubble of 2000, be it land prices or the economy. I shouldn't say land prices, but the economy in general. 5 to 6 years ago, 2008 was an awfully bad year. We saw a lot of asset prices fall apart. Farm prices, to be fair, farm prices are down. Land prices, and I, like everyone, I try and stay on top of this, close to it. It doesn't feel like a bubble. They are softer. Prices don't go, trees don't grow to the sky. They're going to settle back some, and we're hearing some of that. But a bubble, I mean, that implies going back to land prices of 10 to 15 years ago, and I don't see that happening. There's still too much interest in buying it. Will it get softer? Will you see some levels come down a little bit? Yeah, we've already seen it, and we'll see it in rents too, a little bit. Tough thing in agriculture. We are quick to ramp prices up. We're awfully slow on the way down.
Great point.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that when we hear the word bubble, we have a lot of fear.
Oh, yeah.
So can you put some facts and figures or some science to this bubble thing?
Well, it's difficult. Land prices are a funny thing, and we go on so much anecdotal evidence and so on. I will say that corn and soybean and wheat prices where they are today are not going to pay for $10,000 land. And yet we could have made this argument 15 years ago with $2 corn and $4,000 land. You had a hard time making it pencil at that time. We've got higher grain prices. They have backed off from their highs, but we're not going back to year 2000 levels. I don't believe that. We're not going to go back to $2 corn. We're not going to go back to $5 soybeans and $4 wheat.
Let's hope not. What are some of the pressures that are pushing the price downward?
Demand, I like to remind people, demand is pretty good. If you look worldwide in U.S. demand for soybeans, for wheat, for corn, ethanol production is surprisingly robust. Given the decline in energy prices, the problem is growth. Demand has stopped this upward, this strong upward trend that we've enjoyed for better part of a decade.
Why?
It's back, well, we aren't building ethanol plants anymore. So ethanol use of corn flattened out actually starting about 5 or 6 years ago. It flattened out. It is on, it grows a tiny bit, but it's flattened out. Soybean demand, the growth was driven by China and still is. A lot of people don't realize that China today imports as many soybeans as our country used to produce 15 to 20 years ago. That's how many soybeans they import today. That trend hasn't stopped, and yet we're concerned about China.
And concerned because?
Well, just that economy in general. It is being driven, their demand for soybeans is a demand to feed more hogs, to produce more pork, to support growing demand in an economy where incomes are growing. Take the growth out of their incomes and it's going to affect soybean demand.
What can our rural communities and farmers do to mitigate or reduce the impact of all these cycles and changes?
Well, first of all, we have to come to terms with the fact that the world has changed in the last year and a half. I talk about the period 2007 to 2014 as the second golden age of agriculture. And grain producers, I don't include livestock producers in this, grain producers enjoyed in that 7-year period, 07 to 14, a really unprecedented run in profitability in grain production, be it corn, soybeans, wheat, whatever you were producing. And the concern is it was a long enough period that you develop expectations about what's normal. And
A new normal.
A new normal. And I want to tell people, well, that was an extraordinary period, and we should accept it for what it was, an extraordinary period, not a new normal. And unfortunately, we're coming back to the old normal, which is margins are very thin. We have to change our approach to marketing in this new situation. We have to revisit our costs of production and frankly, our family living costs, because you develop bad habits when the money flows in easily, as it had for a few years. So we have to revisit some of those things.
Are there any agencies or programs that can help farmers make those adjustments and maybe do some accounting and cash flow work?
Yeah, we've got a great farm business management program here in Minnesota, and if a producer is not tied into that program, they ought to be. They do a lot of good work, hardcore analytical work, really looking at cost drivers and so on, helping you get your hands around that. And of course, the University of Minnesota Extension does a lot of good work.
Looking forward, Ed, what do you think the next 5 years is going to look like for farmers and rural communities?
They're going to be more challenging years. We are in our low prices today are a combination of demand, which is good, but flattened out, and supply that caught up to it. And particularly in the world of soybeans, we've just finally, supply has caught up to demand. And I'm not just talking about the US, I'm talking about South America too. And when we're in that situation, as long as supply is good, we're going to be in the good old bear market. So hunker down.
Ed, you talked a little bit about ethanol adding value to crops.
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly has taken a large part of the supply and used it. What about livestock? How does that fit into this bubble and the economy we're now in farming?
Well, livestock has been the traditional home for corn in particular. And the livestock end of the market, the cattle end of the market, is very good. It's been robust. Dairy has improved. Hogs hanging in there. Demand for corn in the livestock area is good right now, but it's not a big growth area. And of course, when you talk about the growth of ethanol and a strong ethanol market, that also means a strong supply of DDGs. And that's become a new feed source in the last decade that we didn't. It's displaced a lot of corn in feed rations. It's changed that world.
Well, from what I'm hearing, if we want to make things better, we've got to protect those margins, get as much as we can out of our product, add value, talk to people like farm business management people, talk to Ed Ussett at the University of Minnesota about marketing, doing the best we can with what we've got. And I heard the word hunkering down, right?
Yeah, these good times as we had, sometimes they teach us bad lessons. And the marketing approach that worked for a number of years is the opposite of what I preach. I like people to be proactive and look ahead. And I'm telling people, get proactive again. Treat rallies as selling opportunities.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Ed, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
Wonderful
Thank you.
advice.
Good.
Stay with us for more Farm Connections.
This past summer, a tradition that was 167 years old came to an end when open outcry futures trading at the Chicago Board of Trade was permanently discontinued. The Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group, which manages grain and oilseed futures at the Board of Trade, made the decision to switch totally to electronic futures trading for grain futures. Many grain traders, local grain elevator managers, and farm operators have fond memories of past days when a majority of grain futures were traded through face-to-face communication in the grain pits at the Board of Trade. The Chicago Board of Trade actually has a long history tracing back to 1848. In 1848, it was developed to promote commerce. And in the beginning, it was just open outcry trading of actual commodities between buyers and sellers. It was all on a cash contract basis. By 1865, much of what we know today in the grain trading industry became reality. Standardized contracts were developed for quantity, quality, points of delivery, as well as pricing methods. This led to the standardized futures contracts, some of which are very similar to what we have today. It also led to totally change the way farm operators, grain elevators, and other end users bought and sold various grain commodities. And led to what we know as hedging, where you didn't actually have to own the actual commodities. The open outcry process at the Board of Trade grew through the late 1800s and the early 1900s. By 1992, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange developed electronic futures trading, which totally changed all commodities futures trading, including grain futures trading. And by 2015, less than 1% of all grain futures were traded through the open outcry method, and ultimately led to the discontinuation of that method of trading and the total use of electronic futures. Just as iPhones and iPads have changed the way we communicate with one another compared to wall phones and written letters, electronic futures grain trading has changed how we set grain prices compared to the open cry grain pits. Electronic grain trading makes trading easier, more accessible, as well as improves the communication in the industry. Fortunately, the integrity of the grain trading industry is just as solid as ever. And having grain futures trading as a risk management tool is as important as ever to grain farmers, livestock producers, and others in the agriculture industry. For many of us, we will always have special memories of the times of open outcry trading in the grain pits at the Chicago Board of Trade. I'm Kent Theisse, and we'll see you next time.
Joining us again on Farm Connections is JoAnn Lower from Northwood, Iowa. JoAnn, welcome to Farm Connections.
Thank you, Dan.
You're such a great storyteller. What have you got for us today?
Have a little story about a summer vacation. We didn't own it. Mom firmly believed that you should never buy anything you can't pay cash money for. So she did not allow Dad to buy our farm. For more than 20 years, we rented that 120 acres of rich Iowa farm soil 4 miles south of Thompson, Iowa. We didn't own it, but I believe that it belonged to us anyway, and we belonged to it. Now, most days between spring and late fall, you could find my dad sitting atop that old B. John Deere, planting, cultivating, harvesting. The tractor was old. The steel seat was hard. And the only thing between Dad and that blistering sun was a faded old yellow umbrella. Dad's dark green shirts with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows exposed his leathery brown arms, his strong summer hands. Dad was a good farmer. He believed in farming. But there was one more thing that he believed in as much, and that was family summer vacations. About mid-August, when he could leave the fields for a little while, Mom had canned all the tomatoes and frozen the strawberries and made jams and jellies from the plums and the grapes. We went on vacation. For 2 weeks, we went on vacation. To the Black Hills, to the Rocky Mountains. Now I know what you're thinking. No farmer can go on vacation for 2 weeks. But we Ostranders could, because our neighbors who lived just a little up from the Myrie Slough, about a mile from our farm south, the Peebles, Jim and Ray Peebles, came to our farm to do all the chores. Morning and night, they came to do the milking, to take care of the pigs, the chickens, my sheep. They did everything. And just before we were about to leave on vacation, I would pull Ray Peebles aside and say, I know you have a lot to do, Ray, but please remember, if you would, to throw the filter from the cream separator out for Laddie. Would you throw that out for our dog? He really loves that filter from the cream separator. And don't worry, if it should fall in the dirt or the gravel, he'll eat it anyway. And a bowl of milk, if you would set out for the cats and the pigeons. Yes, they drink together. Please set that out. They love that. But there's one thing, Ray. The chickens. I know Mom wants you to take care of the chickens. I know she wants you to feed them and to pick the eggs, but oh, please don't. Please don't. Because if you don't feed them, you see, maybe by the time we get back, they'll be gone. There won't be any more chickens. I hate chickens. Finally, the day came. Even before the rooster had crowed, Mom had my brothers, Jimmy and Donnie, and I tucked into the back of that 55 yellow and white Chevy, still in our pajamas, clutching our pillows, so sleepy. The top carrier that Dad had made on the top of the car, filled with a 6-person army green tent, enough food for 2 weeks, cooking utensils, sleeping bags, air mattresses. Mom didn't like to camp. She said, JoAnn, it's a lot easier to stay home. I said, but Mom, it's so much fun to go camping. And she said, you just wait until you have 3 kids of your own, and then you tell me. Dad behind the wheel, Mom in the front seat, down the road past the Peebles, that curvy little gravel road around the Myrie Slough. And then we came to Sunnyside Farms, perfectly manicured lawns, the yellow buildings, Sunnyside Farms, so beautiful. And then to Forest City. And then we turned west. And We turned west to the Black Hills. Oh my goodness. Oh, Dad, even before breakfast, we are shouting, Dad, Dad, look, it says Wall Drug, 500 miles. Dad, can we stop at Wall Drug? Oh, Prairie Dog Town, Dad, I've never seen a prairie dog. Can we stop there? Oh, the Reptile Gardens, can we stop there, Dad? Dad just kept smiling the whole way. And then he saw the signs. Hey kids, look at the signs. It says, remember these? School ahead, take it slow. Let the little shavers grow. Burma shave. Oh, camping was wonderful. We loved it. So much fun to cook outside and eat outside and sleep in the tent. Mount Rushmore, the reptile gardens, those giant turtles, I loved them. But about the second week, I started to get this kind of funny feeling in my stomach. Dad, do you think Laddie misses us? And then a little later, Dad, I miss the chickens. Can we go home? I guess that was his cue. We packed everything up, slept almost all the way home until the land started to look familiar again for a city. Sunnyside Farms, the curvy road around the Myrie Slough, and then stopping at the top of the hill right outside Peebles Farm. He stopped the car. Dad, don't stop now. I can see our farm right there 1 mile away. But he just smiled, calmly got out of the car, camera in hand, and he took a picture of our farm. Home, he said, best picture of all.
What a wonderful story.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing. A very vivid reenactment of a very fun time in your life. Why do you do this? Why do you go all this work to tell stories?
Sometimes it is a lot of work. I'm putting myself out there, kind of bearing my soul kind of thing, to change people's hearts. Maybe so they can see how it used to be, and it still can.
JoAnn, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. It was wonderful.
Wonderful story, wonderful person. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Stay with us for more Farm Connections.
Exploring career opportunities in agriculture. Ag 101. Funding for Ag 101 provided by the Ag Star Fund for Rural America.
Good afternoon. I am here with Maggie Mills from the Goodhue FFA chapter in Goodhue, Minnesota, and Maggie's going to tell us a little bit about your plans for the future when you graduate in the field of agriculture. How are you doing this afternoon, Maggie?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Great, thank you. Tell me a little bit about your interest in agriculture. What do you like? How did you get involved with agriculture, and where do you see yourself becoming involved in agriculture?
Well, I grew up on my family's dairy farm located outside of Lake City, Minnesota, and we have about 200 cows, and so on my farm it was my job to work with the calves, and so that really made me interested in like the production aspect of agriculture. And so I'm excited to say that I'm going to be majoring in animal science with an emphasis in dairy production, and then minoring in journalism because I've also enjoyed the communications aspect of agriculture as well.
Now you're a senior at Goodhue High School. Have you decided where you're going to school when you graduate?
I have not decided.
Do you have a certain criteria that you're looking for in a school?
Yeah, I definitely, I kind of want it to be a little bit smaller and definitely egg-based because I think that that's really important and that's who I am, so I would feel comfortable with that.
According to the criteria that you listed, I would suggest, either University of Wisconsin River Falls, there is a smaller school, but definitely the University of Minnesota. It seems really large, but I think once you're on the St. Paul campus where you would be concentrating with the College of Agriculture, I think you would fit right in there. Also the University of Wisconsin in Madison, their College of Ag is very well known, and definitely in the dairy cattle, I would recommend, I would highly recommend Madison as well too.
Yeah, I actually was able to visit Madison through the National 4-H Dairy Conference, and it's a very beautiful campus, so I will definitely look into that.
What do you see yourself doing with that animal science major? Do you have anything specific in mind?
Yeah, I'm actually hoping to return home to my family's dairy farm just to kind of take over the heifer raising aspect on our farm, and with the communications, I hope to maybe work for like a grassroots organization such as like Farmers Union or something along those lines, and work with their like either newspaper editing or something along those lines.
Well, thank you for speaking with me today, Maggie, and I again look forward to seeing what the future has in store for you in the field of agriculture, and I'm very excited for your future and to see how you become involved. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. For Farm Connections, I'm your host, Dan Hoffman.
You can access more information about KSMQ on Facebook and at ksmq.org.